Hey guys, Chris from Average Eskate Reviews here, and in this video I'm going to be giving you my review of the Stoke. Before we jump into the video, if you notice that the Stoke looks like it's a little bit worse for wear, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just been dismantled because I'm waiting for some Riptide pivot cups to arrive so I can install them on the Stoke, and we've dismantled the board and just tried to kind of piece it together a little bit just for the purpose of the video so there's something in the background. So as always, I'm going to be splitting the video up into categories. The first one, most important for me, is going to be the speed. From there, it's going to be the range of the board that I've been getting based on how I ride and where I ride. I'm also going to be talking on the build quality of the board and then just some general feedback from what it's been like to use day to day. Now, when we look at the first point, which is going to be the speed, the current speed I'm able to get on the Stoke is roughly between 20 and 22 miles an hour. That's going to be based on roughly a 76 kilogram rider riding on predominantly flat surfaces. Quick side note, if you can hear a kind of whistling sound in the background, I've got my laptop exporting a video behind me and the fan is going crazy. So if you can hear that, I do apologize, but hopefully the mic's not picking it up too much. Now from there, when we look at the range I'm getting on the Stoke, from the beginning, I was getting roughly about 6 miles of range. That's going to be riding pretty savagely on the board. But over the course of using it for a little bit longer of a duration, I find that my aggressiveness hasn't really toned down, but the speed that I'm doing things has come down a bit, which has massively impacted my range. Currently, right now, I'm sat somewhere between 7 and 8 miles. It doesn't sound like much, but if you look at it in terms of percentage, the difference between 6 and 8, something that's definitely appreciated if you're going out on a slightly longer ride. Now, when we look at the ride of the board, I've said this in my first impressions video, the Stoke rides completely differently to the GTR range. Now, of course, it having a bamboo deck does mean that it is a little bit flexible, nowhere as flexible as the bamboo GTR, but it is definitely flexible, much more so than any of the other kind of shorter boards that I've ridden from other manufacturers like the Boosted Mini X. But what that means is that the way that you ride the board and the kind of style of riding that you can get away with on the Stoke versus the GTR range is completely different. The deck does feature a slight contour. It's very similar to the GTR bamboo, but not as aggressive in my opinion. And of course the back has the kicktail. But what that means, aside from obviously being able to tic-tac-toe the board, aside from obviously being able to do things like manuals, dropping off curbs, the general way that you can ride the board is just, it's a lot more dynamic. You can turn a lot more aggressively because of how hard you can carve, especially if you get your bushing set up right. And because of the smaller wheelbase on the board and the cutouts at the bottom of the deck, you're able to be a lot more aggressive with your turning, with your carving. And the biggest feature that I love about the Stoke is how nice it feels to slide the board. This is something that I've been working on over the last couple of weeks. I finally got the 180 slide down and it's just a blast. But this is where the type of rider that I think the Stoke is going to benefit really comes into play. For myself, this isn't the type of board I would use to commute. Even though the commute that I take, the range of the Stoke fit perfectly, I could definitely get away with doing that. I personally only take the Stoke out when I'm going out to do nothing but just have a blast and have a good time. If I was to do what I did in the day before this lockdown thing, jump on a train, head into central London and just go for a ride around the entire city, personally, the Stoke isn't the board that I would take with me to London to do that. The reason for that is because the roads in London are just too unpredictable. You'll get to a street, maybe ride for a couple of miles on the most smooth tarmac you've ever ridden on, and then you might have a road that's 2 or 3 miles long that has the crappiest road surfaces you've ever seen. Stones, loose gravel, just nightmare roads to ride on where the 85mm street wheels just would not cope. Any street wheel for that matter wouldn't cope. You'd have to slow down, you'd have to be a lot more cautious, which for me would ruin the ride. If I'm riding somewhere that I know the quality of the roads is very, very high, then for sure the Stoke is going to be the board that I take, especially because of the areas that I've been riding around recently. By the leisure centre where I live, the roads are perfect, newly paved, and it's just a joy to be able to jump on the board, go for a rip. You don't have to worry about hitting pebbles, hitting random bits of debris on the road that could throw you off. You can just focus on having fun and seeing how far you can push the board. But saying that at the same time, if you're a college student who's going to be riding around campus or taking short trips to get from where you live to class, and you know that the roads are good, typically around universities and colleges, the roads and pavements are very nice, then this would be a great board for being able to do that. Or if you live in a city and the range of the Stoke fits into what you need it to be able to do, especially because of how portable the board is and how small and light it is, then again, this would be a great board for you to be able to pick up. If you know the quality of your roads is good, then for sure, why wouldn't you want to be able to ride on the Stoke? If I'm popping out to the store, or if I'm getting on a plane and I'm going to a city and I want a board to be able to just get around the city from my hotel to shops, the Stoke would be a great board to have with me. But if I'm riding somewhere where I don't know what the road quality is going to be like, or there's going to be very contrasting surfaces that I'm riding on, I'd rather save the Stoke for going out somewhere maybe a little bit closer where I can just focus on having fun and not how bad the road quality is. Now, moving from there to the build of the Stoke, it's a much smaller board and you'd kind of think that you'd have to be a lot more delicate with it. You couldn't throw it around. I've seen posts online as well trying to say, why did Evolve put the motors on the back? Why did they attach a bash guard to it? If they had moved the motors to the other side underneath the deck, they wouldn't have needed to. The way I've been riding the board, the way I've been coming off of curbs, if the motors were positioned the opposite way, I would have caught them a bunch of times. Aside from that, the bash guard does a phenomenal job of protecting the motors. The amount of times I've been manualing the board and I've heard a horrible scrape and I've been sitting there thinking, oh, like, are the bash guards going to be able to take that much abuse? Have I scratched the bottom of the deck? And I've turned the board over and there's not a single mark on it. The bash guards are scratched to high heaven, but the actual board itself, the deck, the motors, everything is as you'd expect it to be protected, and the bash guard and the way that the board has been set up is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's not inhibited me from manualing, from dropping off curbs, even from ollieing the board, which isn't obviously something you're meant to do with electric skateboards, but why the hell not? So the build quality of this board has been great. The only thing that I've been a little bit concerned with, and this is my fault for not riding with appropriate footwear, as some of you have kindly pointed out in the videos before, I'm not going to be riding in Vans. I don't like Vans. You're never going to see me in them. What I prefer to ride in is Timberlands. So if you can't deal with that, then that's down to you. If it's not Timberlands, it's going to be dress shoes. Deal with that. But it means that I've scratched my the foam padding on the back of the Stoke's deck a little bit more than most people would if they're wearing much flatter shoes. And that's made me think. I've gone through websites and I don't actually know if you can buy replacements for it. I'm assuming you can because Evolve have always been pretty good at making spare parts available for their boards. But that's the only area of the board that I've been slightly concerned with, just slightly scratching the foam padding on the back of the deck. The board itself has been a lot of fun to ride. Aside from that, the board itself has held up incredibly well. There's no scratches on the battery, no scratches on the deck, just a few cosmetical marks on the bash guards as you would expect, and some tiny scratches, very light scratches on the trucks as well. Now, going off of the build quality points about this board, something I've got to mention is, in my opinion, I think the Stoke is the best looking board that Evolve have made. When I lie it next to the GTR Carbon and Bamboo, no other board pops as hard as the Stoke, in my opinion, especially with the orange wheels. Something I'm going to mention is that I'm looking forward to trying out the slightly softer 85mm wheels, which are the blue ones. I want to see how those hold up in terms of if it softens the ride any more, if it's going to add more grip to my carving, why not? And I also want to see how hard those wheels are to slide out. Now, last but not least, I wanted to just talk about the fact that I feel like the Stoke is the most dynamic board to ride by far. When I'm riding just with Ricky, the camera guy that's behind the camera right now, that you've seen in the podcast and a bunch of other videos that we filmed, I can't explain how much fun it is to ride. Of course, the GTRs are great, and if I could only pick one board out of Evolve's catalogue, it would be the GTR Bamboo. But if you made me choose between the Carbon and the Stoke, hands down, I'd pick the Stoke. The fact that you're able to do so much more with this board other than just go in a straight line and carve, you're able to treat it like a hybrid between a general skateboard and an electric board, just tailors together really well for the type of rider that I am, especially when I'm around my local areas. Even going out with cruises with my kids, it's nice to be able to put them on their scooters or their bikes. If I was on a GTR board cruising very slowly next to my kids, it would be dull and boring as hell. Because at a slow speed, I'm talking between 8 and 5 miles an hour on a GTR board, what can you do to have fun? Nothing. But when you're riding at that speed on the Stoke, you can be practicing manualing, you can be still sliding the board out to the side, making the wheels squeak, you can be dropping off of curbs, you can be snaking in and out behind the kids while they're riding their bikes and scooters. It's just a more dynamic board to ride at slow speeds and at high speeds, which makes it a hell of a lot of fun. I can definitely say that if I'm going to be traveling, this is going to be the board that I'm taking with me, again, if I know that the roads are going to be decent quality. But if I'm in doubt about the road quality, the road conditions, I'm always going to default to the Bamboo with the 6-inch AT wheels. But if you're on the fence, you own one of the Evolve boards already, or you're trying to figure out if the Stoke is going to be a good board to pick up as your first, hopefully the points in this video have helped to highlight what types of people are going to benefit from having this board. But bear in mind, this is my opinion. What I'm saying isn't gospel. It's just trying to give you insight into the way that I ride, the areas that I ride in, and which boards work really well for my type of riding based on where I live. But hopefully this has been a good video for you to watch to get a little bit more insight into what the Stoke is like. But one of the best and most dynamic and exciting boards I've ever come across. And I'm hoping there'll be others out there that will give me a similar feeling to what the Stoke has done so far. As always, guys, make sure you thumbs up the video, subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of the videos that we post. If you haven't already, check out the podcast. I'll link it down below. New episode every week, and we touch on a lot of different subjects with a little bit more freedom to be able to discuss what we discuss instead of posting reviews and videos like this. But thanks for rocking with us, guys. Thank you for the support, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.